So thank you, Elaine, for having me. I'm not usually a speaker. I'm a listener because I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So hopefully I do okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background and why this is so important to me to be here for Elaine and for speaking out for mental health. So I live by the same mantra. If you guys were here yesterday, John Tompkins and Joe Zeiler mentioned this, and it was already in my notes to kind of mention for myself, was when one has the ability to help be part of the change, sorry, I'm going to cry, then one has the obligation to be the change, and I'm one of those. I was born in Eustis when Waterman was still in Eustis, the hospital, raised in Tavares, so this is my hometown. This is where I was born and raised. I was an 80s child, and I turned 12 in 1990, so all my teenage years were in the 90s. I think I had the best childhood. I think I had the best 80s and 90s lifestyle. I was raised in church. My parents are here. My dad was a youth pastor. They were everywhere we went. They supported my family, my siblings, and I on everything we did. My dad was an announcer. He announced the baseball games, the softball games. When we got to high school, he did the basketball games. He was there for youth football and cheerleading and announced there. If anyone knows my parents, Julie and Truman Cook, my family's raised here. So I have grandparents, my great-grandparents, everybody's in Lake County. And they're truly a rare breed. They fell in love at 12 and 13 years old in Mount Dora, and they're still in love. And what you see is what you get. Everything that you see on the outside was what we saw in our home. So this world of mental health and mental illness was not, I knew nothing about it growing up. However, I did go to a public school. I went to the Tavares school system, and I rode a public school bus until I turned 16. And so I knew that my family was different than a lot of other families. I grew up in Bassville Park, which is behind the mall, and a lot of things went on that people weren't aware of, or at least I thought people weren't aware of, especially on the back of the bus. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was no bus monitors, there was no cameras, there was lots of drugs, there was sex going on, kids always would bring alcohol in their water bottles, there was ecstasy being passed around, lots of sexual acts on the bus, and I always sat in the front and had my little book, and I read my school books and pretended that nothing existed back there. I always heard the running jokes that teens were into sex and drugs and alcohol. Figured this was normal teen behavior, and I was able to be protected and avoided it because I was raised in a Christian home, and they gave me lots of pep talks and self-worth, and always expected to go to college, and I was going to be the first one to graduate college. And I was always curious as to why the teens were different than what our family was or what I was. And I didn't understand why teens would turn to alcohol or why girls would let guys misuse them and mistreat them. So I went to study psychology and criminal justice. And I was in Tampa, at University of Tampa, and started volunteering in inner city because, I really wanted to understand why people did what they did and why they acted the way they did. And in my criminal justice books in Tampa, they would talk about all the sexual exploitation and the sexual trauma and the KKK. That was all happening in North Lake County. And that's where I'm from, right? That's here. And I was like, no, you're talking about the wrong area. That doesn't happen here. So I became a juvenile probation officer, worked in Ybor City, and so I thought when I graduated college that I was ready to come back to Lake County, to my little safe area here, and work with foster kids. So that's what I did. I came back, and that's kind of where my story starts with mental health, is when I came back, what I saw and experienced kind of blew my mind about what was going on here in Eustis, Tavares area. From 22 to 26, the next 4 years of my life, I was kind of really involved in what they call the underworld. Leesburg, Mount Dora, and Eustis had inner city crime and racial divides just as bad as inner city Tampa. Umatilla, Altoona was known within the law enforcement area and DCF community for incest and sexual molestation among the families. So not predators, not violent people coming in and raping their kids. It was their own family members doing this. Mascot was known as the hub for sex trafficking for kids 11 to 14 years old, and it's still a very high trafficking area today. Lake County was known for being one of the highest counties for sexual exploitation. So I heard it in the history books, and then I'm now engulfed in it, like working with removing children and helping find safe homes for kids. So then what kind of threw me off kilter was I started seeing my own extended family and realizing that they had significant mental health issues too. And that things that my parents kind of protected me from, I think. And it wasn't until I started seeing them in the courthouse and I started seeing them on my desk with their kids coming through the foster care system. Things that I, again, didn't know was here and had been going on all along. During this time, this is the early 2000s, mental health services here in Lake County was non-existent. The only thing here was a few private practice mental health counselors that only took full rate private pay, or live streams. And if anybody knows anything about live streams, it is a community-based agency. It's primarily meant to be a Baker Act facility, and it's a short-term hospital. It's not meant to be the outpatient mental health counseling services. However, it's the only thing that we had. And it was failing miserably at being able to help the mental health needs of our area here. This is also around the time when the little 6-year-old girl, Kayla McKean, had been killed by her dad in Clermont, and we became on the national news for that. We also became on the national news when the little 2-year-old Trenton Duckett died, and his mom was the primary suspect, and she ended up dying by suicide. So this is all during this time when I'm in my 20s, and I'm like, God, like it's hitting me, like we need more stuff here, we need more help. Like what's going on? Is nobody listening? Is nobody paying attention? So I was shocked. I didn't realize I was having my own secondary PTSD trauma because I hadn't experienced these life and death situations, but now here I am on my job doing it day to day. I knew there had to be a better way to handle this. It couldn't be happening in my own hometown. There was a lot of disconnects because in Lake County, most people were Republicans, most people went to church, most people believed in God. However, on the other hand, drugs were rampant. The tolerance for kids and teens to be molested and abused by family members was okay. It was kind of like shoved under the rug of like, oh, they're just being kids do that, and teenagers just mess around. And I think what frustrated me most was the churches, not just one, but multiple churches would protect the sex offenders and the perpetrators because they were good people with a mental illness. And we got to be able to take care of the mental illness and the children that are being affected by that. But there was a lot of people protecting the offenders. So I began to pray and say, God, like we need more mental health counselors here. We need real professionals to come to Lake County. We can't keep sending them to Orlando and to Gainesville and Tampa. Instead, he responded to me and said, remember the dreams you had as a little girl to be a child psychologist? I've called you to bring mental health awareness to Lake County. So I'm in my late 20s at this point, mid-20s, and I'm ready to leave the foster care system. Like I'm sick and tired of what's going on. I was like, okay, yes, God, I will go save the world. I'll go get my grad degree. So that's what I did. I went to get my master's degree and became a licensed marriage and family therapist. But little did I know what God really meant by bringing mental health support to Lake County. That was in 2007. During the next 8 to 10 years, my husband and I worked with hundreds of teens in the South Lake area. We were living in Groveland, Mascot. We were youth pastors. My husband has he has a completely different story than I do, but we had the same vision to help teenagers and young people. So He was a high school football coach. I was working with hundreds of couples with marriage counseling. We were raising our own 3 children at the time. I have 4 now, but at the time it was 3. We dedicated 10 years of our life just to ministering and helping youth, young adults, and family through counseling, through therapy, and it was not enough. I'm only one person. And so my prayers began to sound similar to what they were 10 years ago, but they were changing a little bit. I was like, God, I did my part. I went and got my degree. I'm providing mental health like you told me to. Looking after victims. I'm offering free counseling and pro bono to foster children. I'm living by the scripture, James 1:27, that says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this, to visit the orphans and the widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And it wasn't enough. I needed support. Not just me, but others in this area needed support. And God kept responding to me and telling me the same thing he told me back in 2007. He's like, I called you to bring mental health awareness. You're going to bring this, and and I will bring the mental health professionals, but you have to build the practice. And I was like, oh, no, God. Like, that's not me. Like, I can't, do you remember where I come from? Like, my family's the what they call, lower middle class, working poor. We don't know anything about business. We don't know how to be responsible for other people's livelihood. I don't know how to be responsible for someone else's livelihood. So I wrestled with God several years over this. And my husband was also not convinced either. He was like, no, I'm staying in the school system. So we kind of wrestled back and forth for a couple years. But my desire continued to grow stronger for the mental health of Lake County, and continued to see the mental health trauma that was becoming more and more evident, not just to me, but to just the general public. So many needs. And so the phrase that I mentioned before at the beginning became louder and louder in my head. If you have the ability to change, if you have the ability to help change, then you have the obligation to be the change. So I began to pray and ask God to speak to Donnie and that he would see this too. And eventually he did. And so we went on the track to open up a family life counseling center. So it took about 7-8 years to do that. In 2016, we formally opened and created Family Life Counseling Center. Initially, it was in our church in Groveland, within children's church rooms and the pastor's office that I borrowed. And since then, we've opened up our Clermont office, which now has 12 therapy offices, and 3 children's sensory play therapy rooms. We opened up in Mount Dora, and then had to move to Tavares so that we would have additional office space. And now we have 8 therapy rooms there, with child sensory play therapy rooms. The week that COVID shut down everything in March 2020 was the same week that we decided to open up in Lakeland and Auburndale, because the need in Polk County is just as much as Lake. We now have therapists in almost every Lake County public school, and we are contracted with Lake County schools to provide mental health counseling to students, as well as many private schools and daycares. We serve as one of the primary referral sources for Kids Central and for Heartland, which is the foster system in Polk County, for trauma-based therapy for foster children and teens. We have close to 50 therapists, and yet it's not enough. So I used to pride myself on us not having a wait list and getting clients seen within 2 to 3 weeks. And as the therapist became full, I would just go hire another therapist. And we train graduate students from over 25 different universities around the country, as well as Florida. This year, we hired our first psych nurse practitioner who is now able to prescribe meds. And his job is to help us wean clients off of being over-medicated, as well as help the family doctors in the area. That's not their area of expertise. And so bringing in nurse practitioners who can help with the psychiatric care. Since COVID, the need for mental health has quadrupled. We can no longer serve the mental health needs alone. There's several new group practices here. There's also solo practitioners, and all of us are very full. Our wait list continues to grow, and we can't keep up with the need to hire more therapists as quickly as we used to. For those of you who are looking, and I'm talking to the young people, or any of you who have a purpose and a yearning, you're like, God's telling me to do something. Perhaps God's calling you to go back to school, to become a mental health counselor, or a marriage and family therapist. You have a job with us when you finish. Your story matters too, and you can help someone too. I was so excited when Brentley shared Elaine's phone number with me and to meet her, because to hear her vision for the Wellness Ranch here is amazing. I think that's a great partnership, a great team. We need this so badly in this area. Things that I want to leave y'all with, that I want y'all to know about the mental health needs. We do serve over 7,000 clients in Lake County. It's a large group of people. So I think we know a little bit about the needs here. Trauma is significant. Sexual trauma continues to be the highest source of PTSD. You said speak out, right? So speak out, I'm telling you the truth. People are turning to drugs. Generational traumas continue, and it's the trauma that's causing the PTSD. Another thing that's very real here is religious trauma. People are continuing to be shamed and punished by their pastors, their priests, and their spiritual leaders. Churches are not sure what to do with mental health. They're coming along. They're starting to understand that mental health is real, but they're not sure what to do with it. They're still pretending that anxiety and depression, you can pray your way out of it, like you mentioned earlier, that the person doesn't have enough faith to be strong enough. And mental health, like she said, it starts in your brain. There are a lot of medical things that go on. Trauma can change your brain. We don't have time to talk about all that, but it changes the dynamics of your brain. And so these are things that prayer and, yes, you need support. We need support. I believe in a higher power, and I believe in God, and he can work miracles, but a lot of times he works miracles through us. He uses our stories to help others. Kids and teens are experiencing vicarious trauma. So maybe they're not the ones that have the PTSD, but maybe they have some of the vicarious trauma that I had by seeing things and hearing about things with their family and their friends that they're too young to handle. There was a suicide a few years ago at Mineola High School, and so that still has a trickle effect on students and young adults. There was also a string of suicides. I don't know if you paid attention to South Lake, but there was a lot of suicides that year in 2017, I think it was. And they went as young as 9 years old. So 9 to 17 years old, dying by suicide. This year alone, we've had multiple families who have suffered trauma, not just by one, but both parents, within days of each other. One of those would have been a natural cause. The other one was by suicide. I don't know where this trend is coming from or what's happening this year, but it is what it is. Children and teen are being left with no parents, and it's not because of abuse, it's because of suicide. People being traumatized by their experience from Baker Act situation. Going to live streams is not fun, it's traumatic. And people leave being labeled with schizophrenia, with bipolar, and in fact, it's neither. It's unresolved grief, it's complicated grief, it's PTSD. And there's a cause of over-medication for a disorder that they didn't have. Newsflash, this is a reality check. Less than 1% of the U.S. population has schizophrenia. I find it very highly unlikely that Lake County has that many schizophrenics running around. I really think it's PTSD. I know the ones that we see, that's what it is. It's even more rare for anyone under the age of 21 to have schizophrenia, and children are being diagnosed with it. Bipolar is also very rare in children. We're not even supposed to diagnose children and teens with bipolar. If you know someone, or maybe you yourself was diagnosed with bipolar under 18, please go get reevaluated for a second opinion. It may be something else. It's likely that it's severe anxiety. It's likely that it could be a form of trauma that you've experienced. Symptoms of a manic episode and reactions to a flashback, a nightmare, or a trigger are very similar. They look similar on the outside. So sometimes the clinicians are not asking the right questions to get you to answer the right way for them to be able to understand the truth of your story. I've lived here in Lake County for 40 years. I've studied, researched the trends, the family patterns, and the social history of Central Florida in general. Because of the historically rigid conservative beliefs, the high levels of poverty that are here, the generational dysfunctional family sexual values, I believe more people are suffering from a traumatic experience that's causing anxiety, depression, shame, and paranoia. And they're paranoid with, is somebody gonna find out? Is somebody gonna believe me if I share my story? Or are they gonna believe my mom or my aunt who happens to be a significant person in the community? We are also expert witnesses for court, have been going to court for 20 plus years now to advocate for our clients. The good positive thing here is the Lake County judges highly respect mental health professionals. So if you're having some kind of court order issue, seek out a mental health counselor. The judges here do respect and do honor what a mental health professional says and how they support you. They allow us to keep your stories of the utmost confidentiality. They respect the client-therapist privilege. Even in the most high-profile cases, they will not require us to speak against your will on something that you've shared with us that's so private. Your stories are safe with a mental health counselor. We can lose our license to practice if we break that. When we provide recommendations to the best interest of a child or a teenager or yourself, I rarely see a judge go against our recommendations. Mental health therapy is valued by our justice system, and you don't see that everywhere. But that is one good thing that's here. There is hope. Not only did COVID bring about a mental health crisis, it also brought about awareness, especially here. When I say our wait list is growing, it's not necessarily a crisis. It's people coming in because they're aware now. They're wanting prevention. Like Bank said earlier, the teenagers are very open. They're not ashamed. It's our generation that's kind of holding that stigma still. More and more people are requesting help before it gets bad. They recognize the cycles that their families have went through with self-medicating, with alcohol. They don't want to ignore the anxiety and depression before they have kids of their own, or you're starting to have children of your own and recognizing, I need some help. I need some support here. It's more often that we see teens coming in for therapy because they asked for support from their parents. Gone are most of the days of a parent dragging their teenager in, forcing them to come to get therapy. I want to share, the last thing is our promo video, just so you can see that the rooms in a therapy office are comfortable, they're safe, they're inviting places to come, to leave your secrets, to leave your shame. If you don't seek out therapy with us, seek out therapy somewhere.
My name is Donnie Burchfield. I am the owner and CEO here at Family Life Counseling Center.
And I am Sandi Burchfield. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, one of the main clinical directors here, and also one of the owners of Family Life Counseling Center.
We've never looked at Family Life Counseling Center like a business. We've always looked at Family Life Counseling Center like it's a ministry to us of helping other individuals.
They provide you with a safe environment that allows you to express yourself in a way that you usually can't or you've never felt that you could. My goal has always been to provide a holistic care, and that's what you get here. You get that holistic care. It's not a business model, it's not a medical model. They call it the recovery model.
I think one of the really unique things about our practice is that we have so many therapists that have different specialties, and so that really allows us to kind of collaborate with each other.
We have over 45 therapists from all different walks of life, different races, different cultures, so they're able to connect. We try to connect them with a therapist who's from the same background or similar stories, so they can feel like someone understands.
We provide mental health counseling to families, couples, children, and our focus is just helping address mental health issues.
When you go to therapy, when you talk to a counselor, it's not saying that you're alone. It's you reaching out and learning skills that you just weren't taught before.
Having a mental health problem is like being stuck in the middle of the ocean. Medication can help you stay afloat, but it's the therapist that's going to help you get back to land.
One of the hardest things for someone to do that needs counseling is to make that first initial phone call. There are people that are here at Family Life Counseling Center that want to love you to life.
When you work in a group, an interdisciplinary team, it makes the journey to recovery quicker, better, and more reliable.
We do traditional talk therapy, but we also use some integrative things as well as things like Brainspotting, the Safe and Sound Protocol, which are all based in neuroscience. We also offer action sports groups, art therapy, music therapy. We really like to be outside of the box, and we recognize that healing isn't one size fits all.
The moment that you see one of our staff members, you just don't feel alone anymore.
We want you to feel like you're walking in a room with family, with someone who truly, authentically cares about what's going on in your life. Therapy is not just a one-time thing. It is a process. You have to surround yourself with people who truly, authentically care about you.
We've been there. We know what it's like. We've been in that seat, and we want to help you get through it and come out the other side whole and healthy.
Being able to see someone who initially comes in broken, who comes in depressed or super anxious, feeling overwhelmed, and being able to see them become empowered, to be able to see them start seeing their own strength within themselves and come in with joy and come in with peace, that keeps me going.
It's completely normal to be nervous. Just come, do it anyway. The freedom that you can have on the other side of it is definitely worth it.
Everyone that gets into this field has their own story and has their own purpose and reason for mental health. And so, thank you.